Hello and welcome to Ansible Artisan. My name is Hugh and I'm an automation consultant. I work with Ansible every day, and this is the first of a hopefully long series of videos that explain one or other aspect of Ansible, also along with a way to write better code in Ansible and take on some best practices. So in this today, we're trying to talk about um, this pattern that we see very commonly, which is how to do an else expression in Ansible. So on this file, I have one way to do it. Let me describe the scenario quickly for you, and I also will have several versions of how to do this in a better way. So this is what I would call the naive approach. So we will decide on the name of a hostname for a balancer based on which environment we're in. So if we're in the prod environment, we will have a big balancer, and that will be the name of the hostname. This can be anything. And if we have a non-prod environment, we only have two environments here, only two of them are possible, then we will select the other balancer, which I'm calling little balancer, and that's just the host name too. So describing the playbook from the first line, the play itself, it has just the one play, and it runs on localhost, connection local, so that we won't be trying to connect through SSH to localhost. Gather facts false because we will not be making use of any gathered fact or variable about this machine. And var under vars, we're just describing. We will send an extra var that's called DC environment, and it can take one of two values, either prod or non-prod. So this way, this looks like an if-else statement. Then the next task is always the set fact task for creating a variable that will live and be associated to localhost. And we have this selector that this conditional we can use for the task, which is when, that just tells us when to run a task. So in the first task, starting on line 8, will run only if the DC environment variable is equal to prod. The second task, which starts at line 13, will be setting the balancer hostname variable to little balancer whenever DC environment is not equal to prod. So this one of either task will run, and the variable, as long as we have a DC environment variable passed, we will generate the balancer hostname variable either with the value of big balancer or little balancer. So at the end, we will be reporting the hostname that we've chosen. So we have a debug task starting on line 18. So let's run this task and just make sure that this does what we intend. So I'm gonna do Ansible playbook ugly else .yaml, and then remember we have to pass the variable. We have to pass the DC environment variable. DC environment equals, let's say, prod. So I just ran it, and we're printing selected balancer as big balancer at the end of the task. If we pass the non-prod value for the DC environment variable, well, we will select the other. Here you go. So we are selecting the little balancer. So what's the problem with this? This is too long. So we are setting a variable in two different tasks, and then we will have to keep track of what the when conditions are. They're not together. So another choice could be on the task starting on line 13, just to do when DC environment equals non-prod. And then it's not clear that this is an if-else environment or an if-else construct, because you have to look at every option and then try to make sense from what you know, what you presume that the playbook takes in an extra var. Another thing is, well, it's expensive in the sense that you're creating a task, which is this task actually runs on the controller or on the control node, um, because the set fact will just assign a value in the controller. So even though this runs on the control node, we're setting up two tasks. And a third problem with this would be the skipping of the tasks here. It's not very natural to see that one task gets skipped and is described the same way because it does the same thing, and the other runs. So when you see the playbook run, it doesn't make as much sense as it could be, especially if you're not the one who wrote this playbook. So I will be proposing a different approach, which I'm gonna call better else. So on the better else case, first of all, let me start with a recommendation. So there are many things that's a lot of functionality that is in Ansible that's not Ansible per se. So Ansible uses, if you know, it uses the Jinja templating engine, which is used for web programming with Python. So it's used and it has the ability to render variables, do comparisons, do a lot of things. So if you go on to the Jinja documentation, it's not just enough to do the Ansible docs. You need to go into the Jinja docs, just look for Jinja documentation. You see here it's called Template Designer Documentation. So you'll see a lot of what the capabilities of Jinja are and what the syntax is. I'm gonna call your attention to, and this is a good read anyway. We're gonna go into this in future videos. So how do variables get evaluated? What filters are there? How they're used, and a lot of different things. But I'm gonna call your attention right now to the part about expressions, and there is support here that says if expressions. So this is a Python construct, but given that Jinja actually sandboxes Python code, you need to make sure you know which Python code does and doesn't work in Jinja, and the part that you're seeing right now is exactly the one you need. So if expression and then Python methods. So these are all things that you can use in Jinja templates. So if you've ever programmed Python, this is a ternary operator, much like there is one in C. So do something if condition, else do the other thing, or rather return the other thing. So this template evaluates to evaluate whatever it is. If a condition is true, else you get a different value. It is an if-else statement. It's just that it's written around returning a value rather than just running arbitrary code. So this here, take a look at this, study the documentation, and there's also a little bit more about that, about Python methods and what you can run in the other part of the docs. This is the Jinja 2 docs. So knowing this, we can rewrite the first naive playbook in a different way. If you're seeing right now, we just have the one task that does assignment, which is starting at line 8. I've given the name do only one assignment for the balancer variable, and then you use the same variable that we used before, balancer host name. And then you have the if expression returning value. So inside the Jinja template, of course, you need single quotes or quotes at all to specify that big balancer is a string. So big balancer if DC environment equals prod, else little balancer. If you see, this is a way of writing this if else statement in a single line. Let's run it. We're going to do the same we did before using the better else playbook. And we're going to send it first the prod variable. And we see that the selected balancer is big balancer. Then we're going to do the non-prod variable. And the selected balancer is little balancer. So this is a nice way of writing it. If you're very, very new to Ansible, you might not know about it. But now you know. So you might want to do this from now on if you have this kind of decisions. But we've done this only for two different possible values of the variable. So this is not an if else, but only an if else. Can we do it when we got, let's say, instead of prod and non-prod, we got prod in QA, prod in QA and dev, or let's say there could be 5 or 6 different environments to take care of. So I've written a way that I've seen it written before. It's the same naive way, but for more cases. So I'm gonna call it ugly case, and let's take a look at it. So here there's more than one variable. I'm sorry, than one value for the variable. We're doing the same thing that we were doing before. So we have one task per each possible value. So balancer hostname equals big balancer, line 10. When DC environment equals prod, we have little balancer for the DC environment equals QA case. And finally on line 20, we have balancer hostname equals tiny balancer if we have a development environment. So we have a big balancer, a little balancer, and a tiny balancer, depending on what we're doing. You might think about this use case considering the environments that exist in a software development or software deployment organization. Inside a big organization, we'll have those. So let me run the ugly case, and we can see that we can do basically the same thing. Prod should give me big balancer, which it does. QA should give me little balancer, and finally dev should give me tiny balancer. There is no longer a non-prod environment, so let's see what happens if we do that. Okay, we're getting an error because when we try to print out the value, then no task has defined that variable. So we would have, if we write it this way, we would have to take care of the possible case that the variable was not defined. So in this case, we don't have an else case or a default case for a case statement. What the equivalent of a case statement would be if we had a programming language behind this. I've written it several ways. So one is, okay, we know and we've learned about if-else constructs. So we're going to use it. We're going to build on the knowledge that we have. And let's take a look at this. This uses the new knowledge that we have. So we have a compound else expression, if-else expression. On the task, there's just the one task. The same case that we did for fixing the ugly else. Now we're fixing the ugly case, or the ugly if, elif or else if case. So this should make sense. Big balancer if DC environment prod, else, then we go into the different other cases. Little balancer if DC environment is QA, else, and then a couple of nesting in there to make it work. And this works. I just wanna mention, or just wanna try the case. We will see the same thing, but I just wanna try the case where we're giving it an environment that doesn't exist. So non-existent environment, and let's pass the alternative case. Let's pass this to the alternative case playbook. The rest will work. And now we're not getting an error. We're getting an empty string. This is because in the last if on line 16, we don't have an else case. So if this goes through these evaluations and at the end we don't have an else case, the value that this expression returns is none in Python. So this will get evaluated to an empty string in Jinja, and this is the way it will be evaluated. There will not be any different conversions. So if you were doing some list if DC environment equals prod, some other list if little balancer equals prod, and finally a third list if DC environment equals dev. Of course, there's no way to telling it, hey, if you don't have anything, just give it an empty list just from the none part. You have to write an else, a specific else for it. But this is not that bad in the sense that it does, and we do end up with a value there. So let's move forward to a different way of doing this, and I've called this a case. We have a better case playbook right here. So in this different rewriting of the playbook, now we have an altogether different construct. So now what we're going to do is we take advantage of the speed and the simplicity of doing a key lookup in a dictionary. The part of the logic that associates one string for an environment with the host name for the balancer that we need is now in a dictionary under vars line 7. So we have the balancer dictionary is correspondence of key values. We have prod big balancer, QA little balancer, dev tiny balancer, and that's pretty much all we know. If we do a lookup, a table lookup or a dictionary lookup using this on line 12, then we can pull in the corresponding value. This is the way case statements are done in Python too. So let's test this part. Alternative case. So now we should have better case. Let's try something that does exist first. Remember, these extra vars are always strings. So if I try prod, I should get big balancer. If I try QA, should get the little one. And if I try dev, I should be getting the tiny one. Now we saw this in the last example. If we put in a non-existent environment, can we set up a default? Right now we can't. Right now we cannot because we're doing a table lookup. We're doing a dictionary lookup using a non-existent key. So instead of failing when we want to print in the last task, we're failing when we want to do the assignment. We're getting tasks, do only one assignment for the balancer variable, and we get an error in templating. Undefined variable, dict object, that is balancers, does not have the attribute non-existent. So let's think about this playbook, and what if we wanted to have a default for the balancer? What if the default for the balancer would be just my regular PC? We're not on prod or QA or dev, we're in a single laptop. So I've written how to create this default value. So I just called it better case fallback. And now we can do, we can keep the logic here in that line that does the assignment, instead of having that spread out between either at the time of printing or spread out between different tasks. We have the part about the default. This is a Jinja filter that if we get any error, even in resolution, then we can provide a default value. This can be a variable. Right now, I'm just hard coding it to localhost, but this can be a variable if maybe, I don't know, maybe there is a default balancer for all different environments that are not either prod or QA or dev. So set fact, pick one from the key. If there is an error, even a templating error right there, so pick the default, which is localhost. Let's try this. Same line, just change for the better case fallback playbook for the non-existent environment. We are getting localhost as the default value. We can print it. What can we do with this? This part of using a dictionary, this doesn't have to live on the playbook. This can live as a description in a group vars, or in a host vars, or in a vars files, or even inside a Ansible Vault encrypted file. So this can live anywhere. We can include it. This can be part of a default, the defaults in an Ansible role. We can put it anywhere. So this is part of the power. This could be a definition of infrastructure that lives under Git and is visible and can be changed. So this is part of the good things that we can do with Ansible. So hopefully no one will be writing several tasks in order to just select between a couple of values or many more values. This is both faster, more maintainable, and if I dare say so, more elegant. I hope this is useful for you. The code is on the description of the video under GitHub, github.com, Ansible Artisan, and this has the name else pattern. So my name was Hugo, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me your comments either on GitHub or on YouTube, wherever you saw this video. If you find a better way to do this, please let me know. I'm always interested about listening and about new ways of doing this. And I'll see you in the next video.